2021. And you may have heard of our event before or attended previous sessions, but in case you're new, here's a little background. First of all, please make sure that you are muted during today's presentation. We'll have some time at the end for questions, and you can utilize the chat box as well. We had our first Vernal Poolooza in 2019 at Ashland University, and that was a huge success. And we are looking forward to our next in-person conference in 2022. So the dates are shown here. It'll be Thursday, March 24th through Sunday, March 27th at Salt Fork State Park. And we are currently calling for speakers. So if you are interested in presenting or sharing any material, please reach out to OWA, Ohio Wetlands Association President Mark Dilley, and his email address is there for you to utilize. So today we are in our third session of our virtual conference. And we have a total of 5 sessions. These are all taking place on Fridays from 11:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. We have a list of the different topics there. And today we are going to be hearing from Josh Dyer about vernal pool amphibians. If you missed the first 2 sessions or you won't be able to attend the next 2 sessions, don't worry. They are recorded and available on Ohio Wetlands Association YouTube channel. And today we are also streaming live on Facebook. So that's taking place occasionally as well. Each presentation will be about 45 minutes of formal PowerPoint presentation. And then we'll have about 5 minutes or so for questions. So if you have any, feel free to use the chat box, and we can have time at the end of Josh's presentation for those questions and comments as well. At the end, we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes of virtual field trips, which are really cool ways to get you guys outside and exploring vernal pools around Ohio. So stay tuned until the end for that. So this week's presentation, we have Josh Dyer joining us from Crawford Park District, and he works in North Central Ohio. And there at the Park District, staff conduct many programs for the public and local schools. Josh's interests in vernal pools began in about 2009 with an inquiry about the unisexual ambystoma complex. That inquiry led to his involvement in a statewide genetics survey to identify populations of this unusual group of Sallies, which in turn led to Crawford County specific genetics work to identify population movement across a fragmented landscape. Through this research, his love of vernal pools and the amphibians within spurred his curiosity to learn anything and everything he could about the amphibians in these ephemeral yet wonderful wetlands. He has also found county records of spotted and Jefferson salamanders and the northern map turtle. Josh submitted many local records for the Hurt Bible, otherwise termed as Amphibians of Ohio, and is a contributing author to the now in print Reptiles of Ohio, specifically the Midland Painted Turtle chapter. He is currently involved in H2 Ohio Initiative, which is a project putting more wetlands on the ground, and still actively explores Crawford County vernal pools with his 2 girls. So with that, I'll hand it over to Josh, and hopefully you can share your screen here.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. So yeah, we've got a lot of animals to cover in this presentation. I did some did some tallying, and there are roughly about 6 species of salamanders that utilize vernal pools, and at least 9 species of frogs and toads that utilize vernal pools throughout Ohio. So we'll go ahead and get started. And I will say I'm not the best photographer in the world, but hey, I'm sharing what I got. But when people think spring, of course, I get the phone call, hey, I saw a robin, is spring right around the corner? Well, robins hang out, can hang out all winter long. So I don't see robins as quite the sign of spring, as much as I actually view frogs as our signs of spring and how far along spring is coming. And so with that, we'll kind of go through some frogs first. And so we'll start with the wood frog. The wood frog is a very 2 to 3 inch frog. You can see these two here, and they're what they call amplexus, male on top, female on the bottom. And the wood frogs, they do exhibit a little bit of what we refer to as sexual dimorphism, in that the females typically are more salmon colored. So you can see there on the right is a female, and on the left is a male. Males tend to be a little darker than the females. Like I said, the females are more salmon colored. Could we make sure we're muted, Derek? Derek Humbert, if you could mute, please. Thank you. So these wood frogs, they emerge right after the snow melts, and they come out in droves. These guys are pretty quick at their reproduction activity within vernal pools, and usually within about a week to 2 weeks, these wood frogs are in and out of the vernal pools. You have them based on a wonderful call that they have. Sounds like clucking ducks. The wood frog is, these choruses can be very, very loud. They almost sound like ducks are laughing at you. I had a kid in the vernal pool with me one time, and that's what she said. She says, "Why are they laughing at me?" So now that's just the wood frogs. And then wood frogs also, after they're breeding underwater, the female then deposits her eggs onto some vegetation within the water. And wood frogs tend to communally lay eggs. And this actually helps them develop because of the dark patch in the water around them, or the egg within the eggs. It helps heat them up and progress development quicker. So a lot of times when you see wood frog eggs, you won't just see this one, you will see a whole what they call raft of wood frog eggs. So the wood frog egg has the largest range of any frog in North America. It actually breeds up within the tundra up in northern North America, and they have a really cool freeze tolerance in their body. So there's some really cool videos out there to learn more about wood frogs and their freeze tolerance. Actually, one of the leading researchers in that is down at Miami University, Professor Constanzo, I believe. So next is the chorus frog. Chorus frog, you can tell, is a little smaller than the wood frog. They only get up to about inch, maybe inch and a half. These are actually a little bit bigger. And you can tell it's a chorus frog when you have them because of the 3 lines on their back. Their scientific name is Pseudacris triseriata. So tri, think of as the 3. So there's the 3 lines running down the dorsal side of the chorus frog. Again, these two I caught in amplexus. They also have a definitive song. It almost sounds like somebody taking their finger across a comb. So here's some chorus frog calls. So the chorus frog, they're very common right now. They aren't as quick of a breeder as what the wood frogs are. Wood frogs pretty much get in and get out rather quickly, whereas chorus frogs tend to hang out in the wetland a little longer as the males keep looking for a suitable female to come along. There's 2 species of chorus frogs in Ohio, the western and the mountain chorus frog. The mountain chorus frog is more southern, way down in southern Ohio, and the western chorus frog inhabits most of the rest of Ohio, which is what we do have up here in Crawford County, the western chorus frog. Next is the spring peeper. I saw this guy trying to hide from me underneath some litter in the bottom of a vernal pool. I did spot him or her, I'm not sure, but like with the chorus frog, the scientific name kind of gives you an idea as to some markings on it. Pseudacris crucifer, so crucifer meaning cross, and on this spring peeper you can see the X on its back. So that's what you're looking for when you want to try to identify between spring peeper and chorus frog if you can't hear them chorusing. Now that X sometimes gets a little muddled. Here, this one was floating in the water, but this is a chorus frog or a spring peeper, sorry.
On there?
And so you can see the remnants of the X right here as it was trying to form. Can we make sure we're muting as we enter, please? Thank you.
Birdie, make sure you clean out the maggots.
Jason Larson, mute. I'll call you out. So the spring peeper. Spring peepers are known for that really high upslurred whistle that's very deafening. I pulled some traps out of a wetland one time and didn't quite clean the trap out, and there was one stuck inside of it, and it was singing inside of my truck very loudly. And yes, as you can hear, they're very deafening. And so I did find him and returned him back to his pool. But yeah, they are very, very loud. The cacophony of those three species when they're going, it is literally deafening. That you need to actually walk away and take a break sometimes. So these are the first ones that visit vernal pools. Now, up here in Northern Ohio, our leopard frogs are just now entering. Right about the 1st of April, end of March is when our leopard frogs enter the vernal pools. So these are the next characters on the landscape when it comes to vernal pools. And leopard frogs also have a cousin in Southern Ohio called the pickerel frog. So depending on where you are in the state, leopard frogs are pretty much statewide, whereas the pickerel frog, like the mountain chorus frog, is just in the southern counties. The leopard frog used to be called the meadow frog because it's usually associated with, of course, meadow types of wetlands. So now leopard frogs have a really cool sound. And for those of you that might remember this character, any Arnold Schwarzenegger fans out there would remember this movie. But leopard frogs, they have a low snore. Pickerel frogs have a very similar, but this low snore is very, very reminiscent of the predator. So if you think the predator is stalking you in the woods, it's just leopard frogs or pickerel frogs. So moving on to spring progresses along up here in Crawford County. Usually about tax day is when we can then see these animals. Krisha, please. If you can stand right there. But the American toad, very, very common throughout Ohio. This is a nice chunky female that we have. And so, but American toads are next. They come in and their sound is that really nice trill that you hear right about the middle of April up here. Some of you in Southern Ohio might be hearing the toads already. So yeah, American toads, nothing more pleasing than listening to a chorus of American toads. Females of American toads can lay 3,000 eggs, and it's kind of a process of attrition. You lay more eggs than the predators can eat. So, they lay them in long strings. So come about middle of April, we're always looking for long strands of toad eggs in the pond. To use with programming and stuff. Classrooms like to have some eggs to watch grow and develop as well. So if you see long strings of eggs, you know you have American toads. And lastly, throughout the spring, right about the end of April, the gray tree frog. And the gray tree frog, of course, most amphibians can change their dorsal color. These guys a little more so. But the tree frog, we do have two species, the Cope's tree frog and the gray tree frog. They're very much indistinguishable by hand. One of the one of the ways is that you can use recordings, and it is based on the trill rate of their call, which sounds like this. And you'll notice kind of a call and response. The tree frogs do that. Peepers do that. You'll hear one go, another one go. There's this call and response as the males are singing to attract a female to their position. One cool thing about gray tree frogs is that they have this really fun yellow in their leg pits, I like to call it. I was trying to look and find some information on it, but I haven't quite put my finger on it. But one of my surmisations is that it's a flash distraction, because as that tree frog is just sitting there, a predator doesn't see the yellow. But when the frog jumps, the yellow becomes exposed. So my thought is, similar to birds with some of their the outer wing feathers, like think of robins and juncos, the outer wing tail feathers are white. As a flash distraction to get predators to just distract them. And so when a tree frog jumps, they might see yellow, and when the tree frog lands, the yellow is hidden, but the predator in his head is still looking for that possible color pattern of yellows in there. Just a thought, but like I said, I have not read anything on that, but there's a lot of flash distraction out there in nature, and I don't see why that would not be a plausible idea as to why that yellow is there. So moving on to our salamanders. So salamanders, they, like I said, we've got about 6 species that utilize vernal pools. These are spotted salamanders, which we'll talk about here in a moment. So let's just cruise on down the line. A couple of notes. We don't have these up here in Crawford County, but the eastern newt, when I see this, I say, what the red F? And yes, the newt has a kind of a backwards life cycle. They do lay their eggs in water, but after the larvae hatch, they crawl out onto the land and live this life of luxury for 3 to 5 years in this kind of warty type of skin. They are toxic. And so probably the most toxic of our amphibians in Ohio. And so, but this is the land stage. And after 3 to 5 years, they then return to the pools and live a life as an adult. This is the adult phase. And these are the ones you will see swimming around in the water this time of year. So, but again, we don't have these up here. If you're in southern and eastern Ohio, they do have, there are pretty good populations of these. These guys are known to eat on some of the egg masses of some of the other amphibians that lay their eggs in vernal pools as well. Another one that isn't quite well known in the state is the four-toed salamander. This in here, they come in the this time of year in the spring. But what the females do is, instead of laying their eggs actually in the water, they find half submerged logs that have moss on them and kind of crawl up between the moss and the bark layer of the tree. And so they crawl up in there, lay their eggs, and hang out with them. And when the eggs eventually hatch, then the little larvae drop into the water. So kind of different than the other amphibians that we have, they use the vernal pools where they just actually deposit their eggs in the water. So, but the four-toed salamander, there's not a lot of records, but they are becoming increasingly more common. I think it's maybe due to understanding how to look for them. So kind of like the spadefoot toads, we didn't think there were many of them, but when they figured out how to actually, when these things came out, their distribution exploded exponentially across the state. So it just could be a matter of we aren't looking at the right place at the right time for four-toads. Very small salamander, one of our smallest in the state, hardly 2 inches. So moving on to our ambistamids, the big robust mole salamanders. We don't have these up here in Crawford County either, but those of you in southern and eastern Ohio do. These guys do not visit vernal pools the typical time of year that we think of the amphibians coming this time of year. Marbles actually go in the fall when some of the late fall rains start falling. These marbled salamanders then migrate to basically dry pools. And as the fall and winter rains start grazing, the eggs then become submerged. The female then leaves those eggs. The eggs are now submerged. They can hatch. And then, so if you find larval salamander this time of year, they are going to be your marbled salamanders. So Yeah, just kind of a different timing of when they enter the vernal pools, but they do in the fall, unlike the other ones. The marbled salamanders, 5 inches would be a large one, but very, very colorful pattern. I like the black and white. It's a very gorgeous little guy. So the marbled salamander, and then of course the ubiquitous to vernal pools is the spotted salamander. These things can come out in droves in different populations. I know from reports that people were in the woods. They didn't see any salamanders because the rain had stopped, but they were in the woods when it started raining again, just pouring down. They said that the forest floor literally came to life with spotted salamanders just crawling basically out of the woodwork, heading towards their natal ponds. So here you can see the difference between a male and female. The female is very egg laden, the top one, and then of course the male on the bottom. So these are there's quite the difference. Now, aside from that, the other way to tell, and I can show you when I get a couple of my friends out here, is also by looking at the vent. So if they are not egg laden like this, to be able to tell the difference, if you look at their vent, you can see the difference between males and females in the ambystomid community. So I got a couple I'll show you. So let's see who else is up next. Oh, our biggest ambystomid, the tiger salamander. Tiger salamanders, we've got a pretty good population of them up here in Crawford County. They seem to be more northern in distribution in Ohio. What's really fun about them is during breeding season, the tigers get a laterally compressed tail. And so that helps them swim through the water basically. And so that laterally compressed tail then kind of flattens, or not flattens, but they lose that compression as they head back into the woods for the rest of the remainder of the year. Now, this guy right here is actually showing us how we can tell males from females. If you look right behind his hind legs here, you can see his swollen cloaca or vent. Females do not have a swollen cloaca or vent like that. The vent kind of looks glandular a little bit even. So that's one of the telltales, is that swollen vent on the males. This is for all the ambystamids. So, but tiger salamanders, they're in there as well with all the rest of these guys coming in early. Tiger salamanders, I get reports of people seeing quote unquote spotted salamanders. And I know this isn't the clearest picture, but if you look at this guy right here, you notice he has actually spots, small little spots or speckles on his body, whereas maybe this one down here is more mottled. This one's a little more blotchy, like this one is. My experience with this mottling and blotching or spotting is the younger ones seem to have the spots, because after we've collected some over the years that have these spots, and after having them for about 5-6 years, those spots actually eventually turn into this mottling that we kind of are familiar with tiger salamanders. Now you'll notice too that the spotting on a tiger is random, whereas with our spotted salamanders, they are in 2 rows going down the back, and usually with one right behind the eye like so. So that's how you can tell if, if people are saying, hey, I've got a spotted salamander. Well, are you sure? So you can also see how much bigger and robust these guys are. I've caught 8 up to 10 inches long from snout to tip of the tail. So they're pretty large salamanders. The smallmouth salamander is pretty common up here in northern Ohio. I don't believe they don't occur too much in eastern and southern Ohio. But the smallmouth, just like his name implies, does have, if you look at his nose, it gets a little narrower just past the eyes, and it also kind of rounds off into a blunt snout. So, which is important up here in Crawford County because it helps us discern what we're going to be talking about here next from another species that inhabits some of the vernal pools in Ohio. But the smallmouth salamander is pretty neat. I like the coloration, the pattern of them. They have a kind of a lichen-like mottling on their body, and so just really a different color than seeing the spotted salamander. In Crawford County, I just discovered the first population of those here. They are in Richland and Morrow County, so I knew there had to be some here somewhere. And through some genetic work, we were able to find that we do indeed have some Jefferson salamanders. This was 2 years ago when I had a request for some genetic material, and so I sent off a sample of one of the salamanders we caught on one of our properties, and lo and behold, it turned out to be a Jefferson. So that was exciting to find out. But they are pretty much ubiquitous, much like spotted salamanders throughout the rest of the state, southern and eastern Ohio, central Ohio. So, but Jefferson salamanders kind of give rise to conversation of the unisexual ambystoma. Now, if you look at the two pictures, you can see the snout's different on the Jefferson. See how it's longer? It doesn't quite, it doesn't get blunt, unlike, not like the smallmouth. So up here in Crawford County, again, we just discovered Jefferson salamanders, and through some genetic work, we found that actually all we have are the unisexual ambystoma, because just by looking at this animal, you would not know if that's a Jefferson or a unisexual without some genetic analysis. But in Crawford County, with our lack of Jefferson populations, we were able to work in saying, kind of validate that, yes, we can for sure in most of Crawford County, if we find a salamander that looks like a Jefferson, it's definitely a unisexual, because the work has been done. These guys, I should say, gals, are a very ancient group of animals, at least 2 million years old. Unisexual, meaning that they are all females. There are a couple instances throughout the range of them, which extends up into Canada, up into Michigan and Wisconsin, that there are a couple examples of males, but they were always fertile. So with these unisexual ambystoma, basically you're all female. So how do you reproduce? How does one go about reproducing? Again, you can look at this one. If you're familiar with Jeffersons, you might say, that looks exactly like a Jefferson. Now, genetic work was done on these individuals, and yes, they are unis. But how do you know? How do you know, or how do they reproduce? So unisexual ambystoma can reproduce with any of the four common unisexual species that use, or sexual species that use vernal pools: the tiger, the smallmouth, the blue spotted, and the Jefferson. So here we are. The only one that they don't mess with is the spotted for some reason. Not sure why. But so the unisexual ambystoma, they can breed with any one of these four. I did fail to mention the blue spotted up here. It's a smaller ambystomid. They are state endangered, and they only occur up in Lucas and Fulton County, up in Northeast Ohio. Just more of a range endangerment. You get up into Michigan, blue spotteds are everywhere. But here in Ohio, they're just restricted to Northwest Ohio, outside of Toledo. So the unisexual ambystoma have a base genetics of the blue spotted, so ambystoma laterale. But that unisexual ambystoma, when she enters a pond, she can breed with blue spotted, she can breed with tigrinum, she can breed with smallmouth, or she can breed with Jefferson. And so what the female does is she basically, it's an actual term was coined because of this, called kleptogenesis. And so what they do is they're basically stealing sperm from the sexual species. And so when she takes that sperm, she can either incorporate that or add it to the ploidy of her embryos or zygotes, or she can actually replace them. So for instance, if this unisexual right here that we have, maybe she was laterally L, LTT. Maybe she had two tigrin or two texanum. So when she would breed maybe with a tiger, she could either add that ploidy, which would elevate her to 4, or she could replace it. So instead of a LTT, she would be a LTTI because she replaced one of the texanum genome. So if we look, there are a plethora of combinations. These animals typically are at least 3 ploidy, not uncommon for 4, and actually even pentaploidy individuals have been documented. So you can look there, there's various combinations. I think they've identified over 25 different genomic combinations within the unisexual complex. So very, very interesting individuals. So of course I could go on a little bit longer about these guys, but we sake of time, we will keep on rolling along. If you have questions later on, we can, I can give my email and we can discuss this at further length. So yeah, welcome to the party. Here we are, Amphibian Central at Vernal Pools. The frogs are coming in. Why? Yes, they need to find a mate and the mate needs to lay eggs. So here's a spring peeper singing his heart out. He's on this log. He's trying to attract a female. She finally finds him. And again, spring peeper, notice the X on the back of that female. And so she's seeing him. She's actually scoping out not just his song, but also the log that he has chosen. Is this a suitable place I want to lay my eggs? So here's Mr. Peeper singing most vociferously and saying, come on, here we go. And sometimes sadness ensues. She did not like his location. And so little Peeper was just sitting there all by his lonesome, sad. But yeah, these animals are coming to lay their eggs, trying to find that right mate, that right egg deposition location. So with salamanders, it's a little different. They don't engage in amplexus. They engage in what we term as the salamander dance, where there's some nose nudging. The female basically then, if she is receptive of that male, she will basically follow him along in the bottom of the pool. And I noticed somebody was mentioning the spermatophore. So yeah, so here's kind of a quick rundown of that. So the female, she finds the male, finds a male. She follows him basically with her nose up his vent, because as he's depositing spermatophore, she's walking over top of them and picking up the little sperm packet that's on top. Here's some spermatophore that male deposited in one of our traps. The one here on the left, about just below the middle, you can see it still has the sperm packet right there on top. They basically look like little volcanoes. So sometimes they'll crawl across on a stick. Now you can see there's about a half a dozen of them on this stick. This area where I pulled this from, it was just scattered, almost like a carpet bomb of these spermatophore laying around at the bottom of the pool. So you're looking for these little white volcanoes. And so after the male deposits those on the stick, the female picks up the sperm packet, takes that into her body. She turns around, she finds suitable sticks and branches to lay her eggs. These slimy egg masses are, depending on the species, but most of them are kind of sausage shaped, maybe a little smaller round, with anywhere from a half dozen to 10, upwards of 50 eggs in most species. So this is one of our unisexual or smallmouth. I forget which one this one was, but they're very similar. It's tough to tell the unisexual and the smallmouth. So these eggs also have two layers to them. They got an outer layer, and then you can also see a thinner inner layer here. Now, how does an amphibian hold those eggs? Well, what happens when that mucus hits the water? It basically absorbs water and starts swelling up into the size that we see. So they aren't carrying around that large of a package to deposit. It's actually expanding as it hits the water, or when it gets in the water, it slowly starts absorbing and getting bigger. Here's some spotted salamanders are probably the easiest egg mass to identify. They're very firm jelly matrices in these round globular clusters. As you can see, they look to be about tennis ball, baseball sized. And inside of these egg masses are developing larvae, and spotted salamanders typically lay anywhere from 50 to 200 eggs in each one of these egg masses. So another fun thing, these actually have developing embryos in them, and you'll notice a green color. And I just saw there was some research recently. I haven't had a chance to really investigate it, but you'll notice the green color in there. The green color is algae that is basically taken over the jelly matrix. And so they found, actually, from what I was reading, that these salamander embryos actually absorb some of that algae into their body as well, and they retain that through adulthood. It's very interesting. The algae also helps with development because of the photosynthesis, the sunlight helping to warm those up to, we're talking minuscule temperature changes, but enough to spurn that development of these little embryos. So yeah, the algae and spotted salamander embryo development's a pretty interesting topic. So after that, then of course these guys hatch out. Here's a couple tiger salamander juveniles or larvae. You can see they have external gills. This isn't the best picture in the water, but you can see the external gills on these guys. And right before they head to land, they do basically lose those gills, close that opening up, and crawl back out onto land. So in a nutshell, that's our salamander, how they're utilizing these pools. And they got to do this really quick because, of course, as we know, these vernal pools dry up. And so these animals need to get through their metamorphosis as quick as possible before the dry July and August months hit. Here's another small little cluster of unisexual eggs. Again, they find sticks and substrate. So this time of year is after the amphibians have left. I do want to caution you as you enter some of these vernal pools, as you step on sticks and branches. These sticks and branches are laden with eggs in these vernal pools. So use extreme caution after the migration is over, because of if you aren't quite aware of where these egg deposit sites are, then you have a chance of disturbing and damaging and possibly impacting the population. So just be careful as you walk in looking for those little treetops and branches. These are unisexual as well, and one of the ways we can tell that this was unisexual is, remember, sometimes they actually can clone themselves too. I forgot to mention, if they're in the absence of males, they can actually clone themselves. But because of their weird genetics, they tend to lay non-fertile eggs. And we can see the non-fertile eggs in these egg masses. If you see these little white blotches within here, these are unfertilized eggs. So if you see a lot of these within some of your egg masses, you'll know that that's probably your unisexuals in there laying eggs rather than maybe your sexual species. So, and then again, they crawl out. This was a small one I caught in the springtime. It was actually probably laying in the leaf litter, not heading to the vernal pool, but trying to get to adulthood for the remainder of the next couple years. So it was leaving the vernal pool and heading back into the woods when we captured this one here a few years back. So, these, like I said, I had tried to get through this quick and dirty just for time, but this is a nice introduction to the amphibians of these vernal pools. Like I said, there's about 15 species that regularly use our vernal pools in Ohio. So, they're fun places to explore. I've been taking my girls with me since the beginning. I like, that's part of the joy. I'm not working with any researchers now, but going out and doing sampling at some of our pools. These girls just love getting out in the woods. It's a great experience for young kids, to kind of teach them a little bit of respect for nature and to look closer at some of the smaller life that we have. And so, dragging them along, not just as good for nature awareness, but also gross motor skills, climbing along, and just having fun. So I want to leave you with one last little parting video because you can't start them too young. I'm going to share one more screen here. You can't start them too young. What are those in there? No. What do we call them? No. Number 10. What are those? Tadpoles. Get my tadpole.
What are you out looking for today? Do you like salamanders?
Oh. It's okay. I was just ready to get you out anyway. So the fun in vernal pools never ends. I do have a couple ambassadors. I don't know if you heard my frogs singing here. Aside from singing to see if you got males or females, I did bring a couple of tree frogs with me. I do have
First tonight,
what if your next door neighbor suddenly went dangerously insane
Oh.
and started holding people
I
hostage
think that's
in his
me.
house? Would you consider that threatening? Would you even notice it? Those are not theoretical questions.
There we go. So on the tree frogs here, if you look at this one right here, it's kind of cream colored. Oh, wait. And here's a male, and he's got a darker colored throat. With our frog and toad species, you can tell males and females when they aren't singing by looking at their throat color. Males have the colored throat, whereas females have a cream colored throat. And it's pretty typical throughout most amphibian species. I was going to tell you, I was going to show you male and female salamander cloacas and vents. There's a female vent, very small, you can't hardly tell it's there. Whereas with male Ambystoma salamander, you can see how it's pooched up a little bit, a little more glandular looking with I don't know. I think there's the spermatophores kind of tucked away inside right in there. But, if you're collecting or looking at them, that's a way to tell is by looking at the vents. So I guess without further ado, and for sake of time, I will open it up for questions. I appreciate the invite to help out today with learning a little bit more about our amphibians of our vernal pools.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. I just put up a question slide here for people to think about their questions. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for the interesting presentation, and also apologize, I mispronounced your last name at the beginning. So just wanted to correct Josh Dyer. So we're so glad that you could join us today. Really interesting material.
Thank you. I am putting my email address in the chat. So one question I saw was that somebody asked about how many salamander species don't use vernal pools in Ohio. Actually, the majority of salamander species do not use vernal pools. The mud, the spring, the desmogs. There's most salamander species actually do not use vernal pools. Most of them are spring or stream dwelling types of salamanders. So yeah, I think there's a total of 17 species in Ohio or so, somewhere in there, give or take a couple subspecies. But anyway, the majority of them do not use vernal pools.
So if anyone else has questions, you can unmute and ask. We have about 5 minutes or so for questions. If you'd prefer, feel free to add them in the chat. One question I have for you is, due to the unisexuals and kind of the genetic complexity of subspecies, do you have any thoughts about protection of salamander species and how we go about estimating populations? Do you kind of keep track of all those genetic codes, or kind of just lump them as unisexuals when sampling?
Yeah, they do all get lumped as unisexuals, whether it's an LTT, LTTI, LJT. Quiet over here. But yeah, they do all just get lumped into that unisexual Ambystoma. And as far as a species elevation, I don't even think they are classified as a species. So actually getting protection for a non-species is pretty tough. But the more we learn, the more investigative work that we do or can do can help maybe sort that stuff out.
Awesome, thank you. I'll read a couple questions from the chat here. Do salamanders become aggressive to other salamander species during when they're finding a mate like other animals.
Say that again. I'm sorry, I missed the first part.
Yeah, sorry. It says, do salamanders become aggressive to other salamander species when they're finding a mate?
No, I have not noticed that. As far as interspecies, I've just kind of watched and just stand in a vernal pool at night with a flashlight and just watch the salamanders swim around. Watching a uni come swimming up, it sees a smallmouth or vice versa. Or actually it was vice versa. The smallmouth kind of approached the uni and they did some nudging and kind of, I guess, sniffing around for lack of a better word. And then the smallmouth just ambled on past that unisexual. So as far as aggressiveness, no. Now the aggressiveness is going to happen when the larvae are in the pools. Because tiger salamanders do develop a little quicker and get larger, so they will definitely eat other ones. And a lot of times in our county, I've noticed that if we have a large population of tigers in the ponds or the vernal pools, there will not be any other salamander and hardly any frogs too. They are very, 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 very voracious predators. But that's where the aggressiveness comes from, would be in the competition during the larval stage.
Okay, that sounds good. So somebody asked about turtles. Will they be covered at a different event? Not during this series. Turtles and snakes definitely live around vernal pools, but those are reptiles, not amphibians. So not being covered today. Potentially, we could share some information about that at the Vernal Poolooza 2022. So if you're interested in that, please let us know. Josh, do you recall where you found those funnel traps?
Oh, the funnel traps. Yeah, they're available at Cabela's. So they're the brand is Promar. So they've got different sizes and shapes, but those are pretty good traps. We've had them for a long time. The zippers, after you've had them for a while, if they get froze or something, sometimes the zippers aren't the strongest. I just actually threw out one, but that was it. But other than that, they are really, really good and effective traps.
Yeah, I've bought some poorer quality ones. And yeah, I'd say the zippers is kind of where they fall apart, but they're even on Amazon, things like that. Do you know how long the sperm packets are viable and to be used?
I don't know how long they are viable, but most of the times, I mean, we're talking a matter of a couple days. So I have not read exactly how long, but I mean, when these guys and gals are at it, I mean, it's happening right now. So I know spotted salamanders are known to basically carpet bomb and hope another female comes along and takes up that spermatophore or takes up the sperm. But I'm not exactly sure how long that would be underwater. I wouldn't think it'd be terribly long, as far as going out a couple of days. I wouldn't think that would be a possibility, but I could be wrong on that.
Mm-hmm. And one question is, how long does it take for the eggs to develop and hatch?
That all depends. It's temperature dependent. So warmer temperatures allow for increased rate of development, cooler temperatures for a decreased rate. So right now I found some eggs with actually some wiggling larvae that, based on my estimate, were about 2 weeks old. So that was last week, and they are just now starting to push their way out of that little egg mass. So, but we did bring them into a warmer environment for, so they are developing a little quicker now that they're in the nature center.
Yeah, I think it's dependent on water level as well. So when the egg sense it's drawing down and there isn't as much water, they'll kind of speed up that development process.
Right.
I think for tigers, typically it's like maybe a month that the eggs are there. And yeah, it probably varies by species.
Yeah.
I'll do one more question and then we can answer a couple of these during the field footage. But from Facebook, someone's wondering, can unisexual ambystoma egg masses be of mixed parentage?
It can. Typically, the young, the eggs are going to be basically typically they are clones. The klepto or the stealing does happen, but typically the eggs are going to be of the same parentage, I guess, but there are instances of those eggs coming out mixed. It's not super common, but yes, that can happen.
And it looks like we actually just have one more question and then we'll be all caught up. Someone asked, years ago when I learned the genus name of frogs, the genus was Rana. Now it's something else. When and why did that change happen?
That change happened, I think, about 5 years ago, I want to say, maybe 5-6 years ago. Why did it happen? I think it had something to do with the classification of, I could be wrong, somebody else might know this better than me, but I know it's happened with plants, that the Rana was applied to all true frogs, whereas when they split it, they kept it to the old world frogs and Lithobates to the new world frogs. That's my guess, because they've done it in the plant kingdom a lot, the birds as well. So that would be my guess, is that the Rana, unless somebody's got some insight on that. Are there other Rana species in North America now, or are they all Lithobates?
I'm not sure if there are any other Rana. If people have other thoughts, feel free to keep using the chat box. We will switch into the field footage now. And we'd just like to mention again, we encourage you to get out and use the vernal pools, but just make sure that you are using Virkon or a disinfectant to wash your equipment between uses of different vernal pools, so you're not tracking algae or different funguses that could cause amphibian disease and things like that, transfer of invasive species. And also watch your step and, try to protect those egg masses, as Josh mentioned. So thanks, everybody.
Hello everyone, Liz and Lauren here. We're back to show you what's been going on at our 2 vernal pool sites. So let's get started.
The first field trip site is at Gallant Woods Park, which is accessible to the public during open hours. We went in the evening around 7 p.m. when it was 68 degrees outside. Even though we have documented frogs and salamanders here in the past, there was no sign of amphibians on the day we visited. We didn't hear or see any or find a single egg mass yet. However, we watched a pair of mallard ducks use the vernal pool and collected data. We did find some pretty cool macroinvertebrates in the water, including these caddisfly larvae, collecting material and building their cases. We also found the habitat-specific fairy shrimp, which is kind of hard to see in the video, but there is one swimming around the left-hand side of the screen. And there is, of course, lots of mosquito larvae, which is something the park is known for during the summer months.
Spring migration was in full effect at Dave Warndorf's property. Within a minute of walking back to the vernal pool, we were greeted by a marbled salamander, who was a little too early for his breeding season this year, but he still wanted to join in on the excitement of the night. The vernal pool was teeming with life. We found wood frogs and spring peepers all around, and while we didn't see them, chorus frogs were calling all night. Several red-spotted newts were found, along with lots of salamanders, including Jefferson, smallmouth, red-backed, and spotted salamanders. The spotted salamanders put on quite the display in the water with their courtship dances as they begin to circle and nudge against one another. Spermatophores could be seen deposited onto leaf litter and twigs in the water.
Hang on one second, everybody. I have one more video to be played.
We're here back at Calamus Swamp. It's probably about 60 degrees out here. No ice on the water today. Lots of birds calling today. Lots of frogs. The water is a little bit unclear. Probably about 60 degrees. In this spot might be some bacteria film on the water. You can see a big pile of snails below that tree. Interesting spot for them to collect. I wonder if something was depositing them there. Typical years, there's probably a few feet of water in this spot, and right now there's just a few inches on the edges. Lots of greenery starting to grow. You can hear and see all the red-winged blackbirds. Cacophony. You can hear the chorus frog that sounds like running your thumb over a comb. That low snore is the leopard frog calling. It's hard to hear under the noise of the red-winged blackbirds, but a lot of duckweed here on the water. And we also have some algae. Might be high nutrients coming from the surrounding agricultural fields. So we're getting closer to those leopard frogs now. We're looking for spermatophore and egg masses. So spermatophores would be attached onto the leaves, and the male would deposit those for the female to pick up. You can see the fairy shrimp swimming upside down with its swimmerets and gills moving. Oh, and here's a copepod. Look at this little red thing. This is a water strider, likely in the Garridae family. And these guys move really swiftly across the surface of the water. Here is a tray of macroinvertebrates that we found, a lot of zooplankton, and there is also a midge squirming around. These are sometimes called bloodworms because they have a hemoglobin in their system that makes them red, but sometimes they're pale. You can see the macroinvertebrates in this file and that midge squirming around at the bottom. There's also an isopod in here, but I'd like to highlight the fairy shrimp. At the top is a male, and you can tell because it has an extra antenna, and this is used to grasp the female during mating. And at the bottom are two female. One is carrying eggs, and the one on top is not. So that one at the bottom has a teal egg sac with numerous eggs that she's carrying. When they deposit their eggs, they can go through what is called diapause, where the eggs wait until they know there is enough standing water and moisture for them to actually hatch and develop. So we're here at photo point number 1 near the dock. This is a bit more of the emergent wetland section of Calamus. It's a lot of the vegetation is filling in, and this section is actually pretty deep. It doesn't look like it, but you can easily sink to your hips here. And we sampled for macroinvertebrates. We found some odonates. These are dragonfly nymphs. And in the center you can see a ram's horn snail as well. This is Planorbidae, and these snails are pretty active moving around. We also found tadpoles and this large scud. This tadpole is fairly small, a bit smaller than the bullfrog tadpole that we also get at Calamus. You can see the dots dorsally and ventrally above and below that tail muscle, and the dots are not very defined there like they would be with the bullfrog. And here you can actually see the gut through the ventral side on the belly, which is characteristic of a leopard frog, and at the top is their mouth. And by looking under magnification, we can see, based on the rows of teeth, we can distinguish this as a leopard frog. All right, so that's all that we have for today. Our next presentation will be on April 23rd. That's a Friday, again at 11:30, and we'll be sharing some information about vernal pool management from landowners. So be sure to check in for that. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us, and the link will be shared on YouTube as well. Thanks so much, and hope you guys have a great Easter weekend.